On this episode of Newt's World, Kam Ghaffarian is the visionary space and energy entrepreneur behind several companies dedicated to furthering human civilization, including Axiom Space. After co-founding Axiom Space in 2016 to unlock space's potential for innovation through commercialization, he serves as executive chairman of the board and a key strategic advisor on the development of the space economy. Kam started his entrepreneurial career in 1994 by founding Stinger Ghaffarian Technologies, Inc. SGT became NASA's second largest engineering services contractor, providing operations for the International Space Station and astronaut training support. Driven by his mission to advance the state of humanity and human knowledge, Kam has created organizations transforming the space and energy sectors. In addition to co-founding Axiom Space, his other companies include Intuitive Machines, X Energy, and IBX. Kam is also an active philanthropist and founder of a nonprofit focused on scientific research and enabling interstellar travel. I should say, by the way, he's also a neighbor of mine, a very good friend, and a remarkable person. Kam, welcome and thank you for joining me on Newt's World.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. It's such a pleasure to be with you.
You're just great, and you're always fun. You have an amazing number of ideas every week. But let's start at the beginning, because I think your background is fascinating and a good example of why America is unique. You were born in Iran, and then what happened?
Yeah, I was born in Iran, but from a very early age, like when I was 6 years old, I was just sort of mesmerized with space and stars and star explorations, and would often ask myself, is it possible that there are other people living in other stars? And when I was 11 years old, I saw Neil Armstrong landing on the surface of the moon from my neighbor's black and white television. And that was just like solidified for me that that's the journey that I want to be in. And with just incredible love of America, I almost age 18, migrated to the United States. I've been here ever since.
You went to school here and really developed a remarkable capacity in engineering and mathematics. But can you sort of walk us through your journey personally? Because you ultimately go through a bunch of companies and end up as an amazing entrepreneur. How did that happen?
I went to actually school in Washington, D.C. The first school that I attended was Catholic University of America. And I was the first generation that graduated in computer science engineering degree in the United States. And with love of space exploration, I worked for a computer company called PerkinElmer. I was able to get a job at Goddard Space Flight Center supporting Lockheed. And, I just loved space exploration, and that sort of continued. I guess I had this itch for entrepreneurship. And in 1994, Mr. Speaker, I got a mortgage on my house for $250,000, and I went all in. I'm literally all in. So if I was not successful, I would be bankrupt, and started SGT, Stinger Ghaffarian Technologies, with this other incredible African-American pastor who's also an engineer, Harold Stinger. He literally came to my basement. We moved some boxes around. Most companies start in the garage. We started in the basement and upgrade the garage later. That's how we got that first company started in 1994. And it was a resounding success. We grew like 60x in 10 years. In 2009, I started X Energy. And, it was really because I wanted to change the world for the better. Initially, I was thinking about actually creating a hydrogen economy. And that led me to nuclear. And that's how X Energy was formed in 2009. And 2013, I co-founded Intuitive Machines, which is today a publicly traded company and first company in the history of humankind that successfully landed on surface of the moon 2 years ago. 2016, X Energy, Axiom Space, which we're building the first private commercial space station to replace International Space Station. And 2021, I co-founded Quantum Space. We're heavily into defense technology and actually today heavily involved in the Golden Dome technologies.
I mean, you've really had this amazing range. I have to say, from my perspective, watching what you're doing, I think it may be that the most powerful of your innovations is going to be the modular nuclear at X Energy. And the degree to which people don't realize, but artificial intelligence relies on a huge amount of computing power, and computing power relies on energy. And if you don't have the electricity for the computers, you don't get artificial intelligence. And if we stayed with our traditional systems, we would never be able to build enough infrastructure for the volume of computing power we're going to need. But talk just for a minute or two about the potential impact of modular nuclear, because I think this may be your biggest single breakthrough in helping people.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, you're absolutely correct. I strongly believe that whoever controls the AI will dominate the world. And if the United States wants to be an AI leader, the AI revolution is not going to happen if you don't have a power source to empower it, right? And the wind and solar is not going to work, right? So the only way that this is going to happen is through nuclear power. And I would add nuclear power, more specifically, small modular reactors. That's what X Energy is all about. And this is a company I founded singularly in 2009. Today, we are world leader in SMR technologies. And in fact, we were really fortunate that Amazon AWS selected us as the company to provide power for their AI data centers. And currently they are on our board and leader on our last round. In addition to that, we're building the first plant for Dow Chemical in Cedar Reef, Texas. And also we are a recipient of a multi-billion-dollar private-public partnership grant from Department of Energy, which we were very honored to receive during the first Trump administration. And we're really doing remarkable things in order to be able to do that. But from the AI policy perspective, you're absolutely right. We need the nuclear power in order for AI to be successful.
And I just think your visionary leadership on that was remarkable. But you also have a visionary sense at Axiom Space. What is the gap that you saw in the space industry when you founded Axiom?
Prior to founding Axiom Space, we were basically operating the International Space Station and my previous company, 24/7. We had two contracts totaling $2.6 billion, where we were managing the operation of ISS all the time and the engineering support behind it. And so me and my co-founder, who also was the program manager for International Space Station for NASA, knew that ISS is going to go away by the end of the decade, right? By end of 2030. And so we decided to get on this journey of building the first private commercial space station that replaces International Space Station. And we've done just an incredible job since 2016, almost 10 years, developing this technology on our own, Mr. Speaker, on our own. We have raised $800 million developing this hardware. And our first module is going to be delivered later on this year in our facility in Houston, Texas. And we're going to go through the integration and launch this. The first module, which we call PPTM, which is Power, Payload, and Thermal Module. And we're going to launch this, I would say, by end of 2026, maybe first quarter 2028. And this module is going to be launched and connect to the current ISS. And I would add, we are the only company, this sole company that has a contract with NASA to connect with ISS. No one else has this contract. This contract was awarded to us competitively. So we will be launching that module. And then later on, we will be adding our habitation module 1 and 2, and also a module where we can do manufacturing in space. And long-term vision is to really have, in my view, long-term a space city where people live and work and, maybe you have artificial gravity and, do all kinds of manufacturing and create this new economy. I call it the Leo economy, a new economy that can be created to do things in space like pharmaceuticals or semiconductors or orbital data centers, things that we can do in microgravity that you cannot do on Earth.
That's been a vision for a long time. Why do you think it's taken so long to develop manufacturing in space? Because it does seem to have unique characteristics. I've been writing about it since 1984.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Speaker. And I think the reason is the current ISS was developed by the government. And government is not in the business of commercial, right? And I think you need commercial industries to come in and be able to get other industries to be engaged. In fact, one of my investors and partners is the largest pharmaceutical company in South Korea who's partnered with us. However, these technologies, as we talk about, has been developed and tested within International Space Station. So it's really ripe for commercializing it and create this new economy.
You recently had, I thought, a kind of a milestone. You had the AX-4 mission. When you and I chatted about it earlier, it was, I thought, a remarkable achievement in showing how space can actually bring countries together.
I'm so glad you asked this. This is our fourth mission. But let me just take very briefly about first, second, and third. The first mission, we took one private astronaut from Canada, one from United States, and one from Israel. It was incredibly successful. The second mission, we took two astronauts from Saudi Arabia and first female from the Arab world, which was incredible, and one American astronaut. The third mission, it was all with European countries, with basically ESA, which is the European Space Agency. And we had one astronaut from Turkey, which was their Neil Armstrong moment. It was first astronaut ever from that country, and one from Italy and one from Sweden. And this fourth mission, which I'm really proud of, for the first time we were able to take an astronaut from India and one from Poland and one from a country of Hungary. Again, for each of these countries, it was their Neil Armstrong moment, and their astronaut who successfully came back are really heroes in that country, in India. Okay, there's 1.4 billion people in India who are tuning into this mission. There are 350 million people who are under age 16 who are tuning in this mission. So we were able to bring these countries together and take them to International Space Station for almost 20 days and successfully bring them back. And just imagine each of these astronauts were able from International Space Station to talk to the students in their respective countries and really inspire them to be able to grow the space economy and people get into engineering, science, and math. So it was pretty remarkable.
It's astonishing to me. And of course, you think about, for these countries, what a great breakthrough it is to now have somebody they can be proud of who has been involved. And I think as you develop the commercial space station, you're going to have many opportunities to integrate other countries and to be involved in very different than the International Space Station, which is essentially political. But this will actually be classically a business kind of arrangement. But you also have done an extraordinary number of scientific studies that have been carried out by Axiom Space. Who pays for all that?
One of the key things, Mr. Speaker, that our country has that we haven't really capitalized on is the capital markets, right? And when NASA announced that we're not building another space station, we were able to go to capital markets and raise enormous amount of money. And so when we are able as a government to provide clear signals, right, as to where we're going, that's our huge strength. So we paid for all of that. Now, remember, we charge our astronauts that we take to space. And now most of our dealing is with the countries, right? And this is also an incredible soft power thing, by being able to bring all these countries together and they go in the future to our space station. But we're also working with different organizations, like we've been working with Amazon on orbital data centers. We're working with different pharmaceuticals on the pharmaceutical activities. And we're going to be working with different organizations in semiconductors. We're also work with educational institutions. And we have a very tight collaboration with government as well. So we're bringing government, transportation industry, and different industries together to create this incredible ecosystem, new economy that we're creating.
One of the things I thought was most interesting was that Axiom has partnered with Oakley to design the visor system for the extravehicular mobility unit, which is the one that will run around on the surface of the moon. Oakley, of course, just had their 50th anniversary celebration, and it's sunglasses. It's a common commercial property. How did you come to pick Oakley? I mean, it's a very cool thing, I think.
It's not just Oakley, Mr. Speaker. We also have partnered with Prada in Italy, which made a lot of noise. And in fact, we took our spacesuit not long ago in Milan and showed it at the Galleria, which made a lot of noise. We partnered with many other organizations in addition to Oakley and Prada. But this is the beauty of a commercial. We're creating a commercial space station. And I think by having these partners in, like Oakley, so in addition to space station, let me just say that we're building the space suit. We're the sole provider, our space suit for Artemis program, which is this new set of organizations, our countries that have gotten together to go to the moon and all of that. So we're the single provider. And then the thing that we noticed is, okay, for the visors, if you will, for the spacesuit, it would be a natural place to sort of partner with someone who's into doing glasses and things like that. And I will tell you that Oakley is interested even partnering with us on the space station piece. In addition to the spacesuit, the material that we use for spacesuit is what attracted Prada. And in fact, they're creating a new line of business that is space related. And we have so many other organizations that we have in mind to partner with. And this is also offsets our cost by creating this partner. Just imagine how much advertisement Prada gets and Oakley gets. And by the way, in Intuitive Machine, we partnered with Columbia Clothing, and they've created this new generation of clothing that is space sort of related. And they featured our moon landing on the Sphere in Vegas for 3 days. So I think bringing these industries together not only is a successful business, it's also fun. And it's a win-win, not only for us, but also for them.
The Texas Space Commission recently awarded Axiom Space $5.5 million to support the Orbital Data Center. What is an orbital data center?
Okay, so think about a data center on Earth, right? Like Amazon or Google, all of them, Oracle, they have data centers, right? Sam Altman recently was on a podcast and he said the future data center is going to be built in space, right? Rather than built on Earth. So we're sort of the pioneer. We're the front runner in creating this. And so we submitted a proposal to Texas Commission. And so the idea is create all these nodes, if you will, that are networked together and create an environment where you have data centers that are in space. Just think about it. When you have a data center, what are the two most things that you need other than the computing power? You need power, obviously, to be able to power these AI chips and everything else. But you also need to remove the heat. So one of the things that space has is because the cooling effect of it, you can dissipate the heat. And one of the other things, Mr. Speaker, you and I have discussed is using the nuclear power. And so I'm working really, really hard to be able to build nuclear electric propulsion. We're also working on nuclear thermal propulsion. But with nuclear electric propulsion, you will really enable incredible power in low Earth orbit, but also for the surface of the moon or going to Mars and all of that. When you're able to do that, you have this orbital data center in space where you can have incredible processing power. Think of it in the future. Right now, when we have assets in orbit, we're basically sending the data down to the ground, right? The satellites are able to capture, and we do all the processing of the data on the ground, right? But think about in the future where we can all of that in space. And so when you have compute power in space, you can do all of those things and just send useful information to the ground. This also has huge implication for the Golden Dome as we're thinking about it, to have data centers that are not on the ground from the defense perspective.
I've recently written a paper called Trump Time and Trump Savings, making this argument that there's private sector behavior that's almost inherently more creative, faster, and less expensive than government bureaucracies, which requires thinking about how you build a team, how you recruit people. You have so many things going on that are innovative and creative. How do you go about building your teams and thinking through who you want to recruit?
That's such a big deal, Mr. Speaker, and you're absolutely right. One of the things that I say is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think if I have one strength, God's given me this ability to recognize talent, and I've surrounded myself with people much smarter than myself. In fact, they make me look good. But finding right people in the organizations that are talented and have a sense of urgency and getting things done is really, really important. I would share this idea. There's one of the books that I read a long time ago. It's called Good to Great. And Good to Great uses this example of building a successful company is like a bus going from one place to another. So you want to find right people you bring to the bus. That's number one. Number two, find them the right seats. That's really important because one person may be doing a good thing in one thing and may not be able to good thing in another thing. And the third piece, which is not happening within the government, is to get the wrong people off the bus. So I think these are the three things, right? Finding the right people in the bus, get them the right seat. And then if you have right talent, you really can create miracles. And if you have a wrong talent, you go backwards. So I think to be able to do that is the key to have successful companies.
I don't know if you're the first person to ever say it, but I just wrote down culture eats strategy for breakfast, because I think it's true. And it's one of the great weaknesses and stuff I do is I probably focus too much on strategy and not enough on culture. It's a brilliant concept on your part.
Thank you. And I really believe that. The culture, I call it, is like the foundation, Mr. Speaker. So if you're building a house, if you don't have a good foundation, the house is not going to stay, right? The culture is like a foundation. You got to have that strong foundation you build, and then you build your company on top of that. And when we talk about culture, it's not just culture of integrity and ethics, but culture of being successful, culture of execution, culture of winning, culture of delivering, culture of returning money to your investors, things like that, I think are enormously important.
Back in January of this year, in Space News, you wrote an article. You said, we are shifting from government-led to commercial-led activities off-planet, which I agree with. Describe what do you mean by that transition, and why is it important?
In the past, from the space perspective, NASA owned the rockets, moon landers, spacesuit, everything else. And so one of the things that I think was really clever that happened is by NASA saying, well, let's utilize commercial industry to sort as a force multiplier to be able to do things. And I think that was the beginning of the SpaceX, right? And that's how SpaceX as a commercial space was developed. And it was a breakthrough, right? I mean, what SpaceX has done and now Blue Origin is doing, and many other commercial space company from the transportation perspective, like Rocket Lab, Firefly, so on and so forth. And then NASA later on came in and says, well, we no longer want to be the tenant. We no longer want to be the landlord. We want to be the tenant. So that's how actually the contract was awarded to us for the Moonlander business. And we were able, Newt, to develop a moon lander. In 4 years, we conceive, design, build, operated, and landed successfully on the surface of the moon for $118 million. So you see, when you go to the commercial world, you can really reduce the cost. And scarcity is the mother of innovation. And you come up with, there is all this really innovation, how to do different things. And I think that we are shifting from a government-led sort of space industry to more of a commercial space industry. And I think that's a breath of fresh air, and it's going to grow rapidly and create an economic boom.
But when you think about this, as you migrate from a bureaucratically government-dominated system to a commercial market-oriented system, it seems to me there's a real danger that NASA doesn't quite understand how urgent it is, if we're going to keep people in space, to get this commercial station done before the international station inevitably disappears. What do you think are the key steps, not just for NASA, but for the Trump administration, in acquiring the clarity that will guarantee that the new replacement commercial space station is ready before the end of the life of the International Space Station?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because that's a critical question. We need, as a country, to ask ourselves this question. Are we going to be a dominant space country and a front runner or not? And we have incredible competition from China. Let's just talk about space station for a second. Chinese today have a space station in orbit. Our space station is going to go away by the end of the decade. In my opinion, if we want to keep our dominance in space, and this is bigger than just a space station, this is including the moon, including defense technology, all of that, space defense technology. If we're going to say that we're going to have that, then we got to do things differently than we've done before. So space station is retiring by the end of the decade. We need to figure out as a country, how do we have a space station in orbit before the space station retires and have a continuous human presence and space operation and be a dominant force in this new economy that I'm talking about, Newt? This economy could be a multi-billion-dollar new economy in low Earth orbit that I think is a hidden gem that people don't quite realize. And so I think we need to figure out by the end of this decade, how do we do that? And I have to tell you, the only company who's spent $800 million developing hardware and ready to make this happen is my company, Axiom Space, and we're ready to make this happen. I think we need to have this sense of urgency from the government perspective and say, let's not lose our space dominance to Chinese. Let's figure out whatever we need to do so that we have a space station in orbit before ISS retires.
It seems to me that's a this year problem. It's not a 2030 problem.
Absolutely. I am really happy that we have an acting administrator, Sean Duffy, that is making good decisions. I'm personally willing to support the activity away from my companies. Is what's right for our country to push the space economy forward.
Yeah, I had a very good conversation with Secretary Duffy right after he had announced that we would put a U.S. reactor operationally on the moon by 2030. And I was very impressed with his general approach, his understanding, when you realize that he's running the Department of Transportation, launching the rebuilding of the entire air traffic control system, and temporarily in charge of NASA. His grasp of the NASA issues, I thought, and his willingness to cut through the bureaucracy was very, very encouraging.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I'm so glad you talk about space nuclear, Mr. Speaker, because if we're going to have a colony on the moon and we're going to have a habitat on the surface of the moon, space nuclear and fission surface power, which Secretary Duffy announced, is critical. Look, if we're going to have people living there, we need oxygen. We need to power things. And, with the temperatures going to minus 270 degrees Fahrenheit in the moon lunar nights, the only way that we're going to have power to be able to create fuel, create habitat, to have a presence on the surface of the moon is with nuclear power. That's sort of having a nuclear power on the surface of the moon that Secretary Duffy announced. But also, let's take this one step further. We can shorten the distance of going to Mars by 2/3 if we have nuclear thermal propulsion. We have nuclear electric propulsion. This is a game changer, how we can really accelerate to be able to do things. And my dream is eventually be able to use these technologies to go to other stars outside of our solar system.
That may be next generation. But frankly, if we could get near Earth operating at its highest tempo with tourism, manufacturing, scientific research, and then develop a real presence on the moon, not just a visit, but much like we do. A friend of mine pointed out that we have huge impact in Antarctica because every summer we put 3,000 people down there. So if our initial goal was 50 or 100 people on the moon permanently, with rotating in new people as the others come out, and then can begin to think about Mars, and beyond that about asteroid mining. Now you have a full first generation creating, I like to think of it as creating a spacefaring nation. We've been seafaring for our history, and now we're going to add being spacefaring. And it's important, because it seems to me it's important for freedom to be the lead in space.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. And it is so important. It's the next frontier, it's the final frontier. And we need to have American dominance there. And I believe that combining space with nuclear is the way to get there in order for us to have permanent presence, whether on the surface of the moon or Mars, and be able to also travel to other bodies in a much shorter time than we're doing today.
I think you are one of the great pioneers who is actually developing all this. It's very exciting to me and a real privilege to know you and to watch you work and to realize how endlessly, I think you're 7 days a week of creativity, so pretty remarkable. I want to thank you for joining me. I want to let our listeners know they can find out more about Axiom Space by visiting axiomspace.com, which we will have on our show page.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor to be part of your program, and for people to realize that other than you're an incredible politician and Speaker of the House, you have such a keen intellectual mind for things like space and nuclear and other things. It's just such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you to my guest, Kam Ghaffarian. You can learn more about Axiom Space on our show page at newtsworld.com. Newt's World is produced by Gingrich 360 and iHeartMedia. Our executive producer is Garnsey Sloan. Our researcher is Rachel Peterson. The artwork for the show was created by Steve Pendley. Special thanks to the team at Gingrich 360. If you've been enjoying Newt's World, I hope you'll go to Apple Podcasts and both rate us with 5 stars and give us a review so others can learn what it's all about. Right now, listeners of Newt's World can sign up for my 3 free weekly columns at gingrich360.com/newsletter. I'm Newt Gingrich. This is Newt's World.